What's going on, guys? Welcome back. And today I am going to be reviewing the final 3 episodes of The Bad Batch Season 2. Oh boy, this finale was not what I expected, but not in a bad way. I was legitimately shocked by how many risks they took, and that they actually had the guts to leave things off the way they did. So without wasting any more of your time, let's jump straight into it. Episode 14, Tipping Point, is one that I don't necessarily have that much to say about, but it's far from bad. On the contrary, I actually think it sets the stage quite well for the finale. Right away, we finally pick up with Echo again, as he and a group of clones, including Commando Gregor, attack a prison transport to rescue none other than Captain Hauser, which was a pleasant surprise. His fate was unknown to us after his arrest at the end of the Ryloth arc from Season 1, so it's nice to see that him and at least a few of his squad members have survived. But once they learn the clone prisoners are being transported to an unknown location, which we know to be Mount Tantus, Echo chooses to deliver the data logs he retrieved from the vessel to Tech so that he can decrypt them. And once Echo arrives on Pabu, we are given a heartwarming reunion between our characters, which is very much needed considering the tragedy that is yet to come. As I predicted in my previous video, back on Mount Tantus, Dr. Hemlock is trying to convince Crosshair to reveal to them the location of the Bad Batch, but he refuses to give them up, which shows that his nobility has fully been restored. He's straight up told that there's no hope for him to escape, so rather than trying to do so, he risks facing execution or even more severe torture at the hands of Dr. Hemlock, and breaks out of his restraints, making his way to a communications terminal to warn his former squad, and all he's able to get out is Plan 88. At the end of the episode, Hemlock tells Crosshair that all he wants is the young clone. He claims that Omega means nothing to him. But that's what Hemlock underestimates about Crosshair: his capacity to care. Unlike Hemlock and the rest of the Empire, Crosshair sees the Bad Batch and the rest of the clones for what they truly are. Not property or equipment to be used, but real, living beings. Speaking of Dr. Hemlock, in a very short amount of time, I think they've done an even better job of establishing him as an antagonist than they did Vice Admiral Rampart. Now, Rampart was intentionally a pawn from the beginning. He acted out of fear that he would face repercussions for his failure to eliminate the Bad Batch, and he was easily disposed of by Palpatine. But Hemlock is in complete control of every situation. He uses a gas on Crosshair which he has engineered to affect the clones, but not himself. His mannerisms and way of speaking, just everything about him screams that this is a guy who has complete confidence in his ability to succeed, and this is helped by the fact that at the end of this season, he is successful in what he set out to do, but we'll get back to that later. Echo and Hunter also have a very important conversation in this episode. Hunter tells Echo that no matter how hard he tries, he'll never be able to defeat the Empire. And Echo responds by saying it's not about defeating them, it's about helping their brothers. Hunter says he understands why Echo's doing this, but he asks if it'll ever be enough. This brings some things into question for our characters going into the finale. Moving on to said finale, episodes 15 and 16, The Summit and Plan 99, I appreciated that just like in Season 1, they didn't feel the need to shove a bunch of unnecessary cameos in our faces. At the end of Season 1, Wrecker says that he's leaving Gregor with Sid, and in this season, when Hunter suggests the possibility of backup, Echo tells us that Rex is on a different mission, and it's just up to them. This is a very easy way to write out the potential of any unneeded characters tagging along for the mission, ensuring that the focus is kept solely on our main cast of characters. That's not to say there weren't cameos in this finale, but the characters that did appear made sense, and I thought they were implemented well into the story. I guess Krennic was unnecessary. They didn't need to name drop the Stardust Project, but it stands to reason that he would be at a meeting with high-ranking Imperial officials. At a meeting of this significance, why would they not discuss the progress that has been made on the Death Star? And Saw Gerrera serves as a quite literal reminder to the Bad Batch of the choice he presented them with all the way back in the first episode, that they must either adapt and survive or die with the past. That's a choice the Bad Batch have been trying to run away from for this entire series, and in this finale, they're finally forced to choose. We're even given a visual representation of this, with them gunning down the TK troopers rather than stunning them like they have in the past. Similar to Saw Gerrera, they're now willing to cross some lines and get their hands dirty in order to accomplish their goals. I did notice they stunned the technicians rather than kill them, but I believe that's because they were unarmed and surrendering to them, meaning that it would not have been morally correct for the Bad Batch to kill them in that situation. However, there is a difference between the Bad Batch and Saw Gerrera. You guys know I can't help but connect this back to his Dark Materials, because Saw is essentially the Lord Asriel of this story, the character who is willing to sacrifice anything and anyone in order to achieve his goals, regardless if the people in question are willing to make that sacrifice. In this episode, Saw basically condemns the Bad Batch to death, causing an explosion that fails to wipe out its intended targets, the Imperial officials inside the facility, and which leaves the Bad Batch stranded on a rail line pinned down by Imperial forces. Saw made a minor and unnecessary sacrifice, which had really no effect and will ultimately have no impact on his future efforts to tear down the Empire. But his choice forces our heroes, and Tech in particular, to make a necessary sacrifice. So let's talk about that. People have theorized for a while now that the Bad Batch will inevitably die because they aren't seen with Rex, Gregor, and Wolf in Rebels, but I didn't see that as indicative that their fate was a tragic one. Of all the characters that could potentially die, I thought Crosshair was the most likely candidate, because typically in Star Wars, the fallen hero redemption arc ends with that character dying. But of all characters, I did not expect Tech to be the one to die. It was lightly foreshadowed at the beginning of the finale, with Fee essentially telling Tech to come back without getting hurt, and in my opinion, this was a beautiful way to send off Tech's character. The character who seemed the most emotionally cold and distant, the character who Omega accused earlier in the season of not acting like the Bad Batch were his family, ultimately gives his life to save theirs, proving that he views them as more than just a squad. He executes Plan 99. Not only does this harken back to the clone 99 who sacrificed himself at the beginning of the war, but 99 is also the inverse of the number 66. In this finale, Tarkin describes the clones' independence as concerning. He views their individuality as being their greatest weakness, but we know it's their greatest strength. It all goes back to what Commander Cody said in the third episode of this season. What makes the clones different from droids is their ability to make their own decisions. Although the Bad Batch never executed Order 66, most of the clones did, under the influence of the inhibitor chips. But while they can cause harm, they will also unquestioningly do the opposite, which is help people. And in his final moments, Tech makes this one last choice for his friends and for the greater good. Now, there is, of course, a slim chance that Tech survived. We obviously don't see a body, and it's not like characters in Star Wars have never survived falling from extreme heights before. Hemlock showing Hunter Tech's cracked goggles, saying that it's all he could salvage, felt very reminiscent of Return of the King when the Mouth of Sauron presented the Fellowship of the Ring with Frodo's mithril vest, claiming that he suffered greatly at the hands of his host. That's a classic villain move, making the heroes despair and lose hope, so they're more likely to agree to your terms. I think they're kind of leaving it open-ended, so if they want to bring Tech back in future, they have that option available to them. But I'll be pretty pissed off if they resurrect him. Not because I want Tech to be dead, but because I want this show to have lasting stakes. That's something that shows like The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett have been insistent on not having. So if this show decides to join in on that trend, then it'll undercut a lot of what I'm praising in this video, and I'll be incredibly disappointed. At first, I was wondering why, after the mission failed, the Bad Batch would choose not to return to Pabu and would instead go back to Sid, of all people. But the more I've thought about it, the more sense it makes. As we know, Pabu is a very remote planet, so they probably don't have access to the necessary medical equipment required to treat Omega, whereas AZ-3 is back on Ord Mantell, and he is a medical droid after all. I had my doubts about the theory that Sid would give the Bad Batch up to the Empire, especially considering the compassion she seemed to have for Omega in particular, but nope, she actually sold them out. And I liked the way it was handled. It wasn't immediately apparent. There was a slow trickle of realization as Echo sees Imperial ships overhead, their comms start being jammed, and Sid basically confirms to Wrecker that this was her doing. And while don't get me wrong, I don't like Sid at all at this point, I do appreciate that they didn't make it seem as though she was happy about betraying the Bad Batch. She seemed legitimately saddened by the loss of Tech, and while receiving her payment from the Empire, she looked remorseful. Whether or not that's because of her betraying her friends or because she's brought the Empire down on her own head is unclear. She tried to eliminate a minor inconvenience by calling in the Empire, but as a result, she's destroyed her own home and place of business. As Marva Andor would say, the Empire is a disease, a darkness reaching like rust into everything around it. The final 10 minutes or so of episode 16 of The Bad Batch Season 2 was some of the most intense and suspenseful storytelling I've seen from Star Wars in a long time. I had all sorts of possibilities floating around in my head. Will they kill Wrecker and Hunter? Will only Echo and Omega escape? Will they have to rescue Hunter and Wrecker? Of all the possible outcomes, the worst one happens. Omega is taken by Hemlock, and the remaining members of the Bad Batch are left with no way of finding her. Omega is taken to Mount Tantus, and seeing her rush to Crosshair's side as he is strapped to a bed, completely incapacitated, after presumably undergoing endless, severe torture and experimentation because of his refusal to give her up, knowing that the entire reason he's in this condition is because he did everything in his power to protect her, was just heartbreaking. We also have it confirmed to us in these final moments that the scientist lady, Emery, who we first met back in the 11th episode of this season, is actually a clone of Omega, and I had figured that after Crosshair spared her life in episode 14, most likely because she reminded him too much of Omega, and it became very evident to me after the camera focused on her following Hemlock's line about how Omega means nothing to Crosshair. This does raise some interesting questions, though. Will she be an enemy or an ally? Will Omega have to make her reconsider her allegiances? I can't wait to see where this goes in Season 3. The Bad Batch now have no choice but to adapt and survive. They refused to die with the past, but they've avoided conflict at every turn. They did brief jobs here and there for the good guys, but they were always in and out, never remaining longer than necessary. But now everything they built has crumbled. They tried to lay low and trusted Sid. Where did that get them? Their family, which first started to fall apart back at the beginning of Season 1 with Crosshair remaining loyal to the Empire, has completely shattered. Tech is presumably dead, and Omega has now been taken into Imperial custody with no hope of rescue. They need to listen to Echo now and help their brothers. Get involved in the conflict, because if they don't, they'll lose any chance at getting their family back, Omega and Crosshair. I can't think of an ending to any Star Wars project, aside from the conclusion to the Clone Wars Season 7, that has been this hopeless and bleak. I mean, really think about it. A lot of people say that Empire Strikes Back has one of the biggest cliffhangers of all time, which I suppose is the case, but you do get the vibe at the end of that film that they have a plan in place to rescue Han. There's still hope. Revenge of the Sith is a very dour movie, but there is that lingering sense of hope that Luke and Leia will eventually be able to bring balance to the Force. Even in The Last Jedi, after the Resistance is seemingly crushed, they have hope that they can rebuild. There is, of course, the concern that future seasons of this show may diminish the impact of this finale. Will they bring Tech back? Will the Bad Batch get Omega back in 2 episodes, just like how Mando reunited with Grogu 2 episodes after he gave him to Luke? I don't think so, because this show has a track record of taking its time with the story. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not until the end of the 3rd season when all of our characters reunite. A lot of people, myself included, expected the Bad Batch and Crosshair to meet again this season. Well, that still hasn't happened. Most of us thought this finale was going to be the Bad Batch finding Crosshair's location, flying in to rescue him, liberating the clones, and escaping in a blaze of glory. One happy family. But that is not what we got. Everything went horribly wrong for these characters, and we were given an incredibly dark, mature, and thought-provoking finale, which I cannot commend them enough for. I'm planning on making one more video discussing this season overall, how it compares to the first one, and what I'm hoping for in Season 3, but as for now, that's really all I have to say about the Bad Batch Season 2 finale. I could not have asked for a better conclusion to this season. It wrapped everything up seamlessly, while simultaneously setting the stage brilliantly for future stories to be told with these characters. But what did you guys think? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Just whatever your thoughts are on the final 3 episodes of The Bad Batch Season 2, please let me know them all in the comments below. And of course, as always, I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.